Hi guys, and welcome back to Lasting Peace. I tried to record this video outside because it is the most beautiful day here in Georgia, but I got some kind of error message and I think my internet just wasn't strong enough to pick it up on the back porch. So here we are indoors in my plain Jane office. But that won't change the message. I am super excited to share some really encouraging words with you today. I was listening to a sermon actually at home this morning before I went to church, and this was by Steven Furtick, the pastor of Elevation Church in South Carolina. And I will put a link to his church and to this sermon on my blog, so I hope that you'll go listen to that. But I wanted to share with you, particularly if you are stuck somewhere in the long continuum of a difficult recovery from an eating disorder or some other addiction or some other just long-term struggle. For me, my dealing with anorexia was, I vary. Sometimes it says 14, sometimes I say 18, because there were windows in there where I started to feel better and I started to get it right, and I relapsed. All total, it was a good 18 years. But there is hope, not only for full recovery, but for God to use what you've struggled with in the future, for you to gain greater strength from it and to be able to share strength with others. I feel like I pray that I'm a testimony of that to you today, that He has taken what threatened my life and is now enabling me to encourage you in your struggles with an eating disorder or another addiction. The first thing that Mr. Furtick said was, opposition does not prevent the presence of God, but provides an opportunity to prove the presence of God. And he was talking about the story of David and Goliath. And he pointed out that the entire army of Israelites had been facing the Philistines for days on end. And they all served the same God that David did. And all of them had the weapons and everything they needed to win that battle. But they were afraid. And so they never went to face them. They saw this obstacle as preventing God's presence. God wouldn't deliver them. But David saw it as an opportunity to prove God's presence. And he went into the battle speaking out loud what he believed. Straight up as he walked toward Goliath, he was telling him, I serve the living God and I will win this battle. The next thing that I thought was really interesting was David went into the battle with Goliath without a sword. He went in with a sling. Everybody knows that story. But one thing we don't often hear or remember if to read the rest of the story is after David killed Goliath with a sling, he went to Goliath and stole his sword and cut his head off. David left that battle with the sword. And Steven Furtick expressed that by saying, stop surviving what God has called you to conquer. The Israelites were standing by. They were sparing their lives by not going into battle, but they were just barely making it. And I spent a lot of years there with my eating disorder, just barely hanging on. But God doesn't want us to merely survive. Stop surviving what God has called you to conquer. David took that sword, and David ended up in service to the king. The items that he had taken from Goliath, his head, his helmet, all those other things, ended up in the temple, for one. That was where the sword ended up. And years later, about 14 years later, David ended up fleeing from King Saul, who wanted to kill him out of jealousy. And David went to the priest at the temple and he asked, do you have any weapons? Do you have a sword here? Because he had left and fled for his life so quickly that he had nothing. He didn't bring anything to defend himself. And the priest said, well, there is that sword that belonged to the Philistine that you killed. So David had now in his hands the very thing that had up until that time probably been the greatest threat to his life. And now it was his defense. What was meant to destroy you will be used to deliver you. That was another great line by Steven Furtick. And I feel like I am a testimony of that today. So if you're stuck in the long process of recovery, if it feels like you're never going to make it and these years have been wasted and what good could ever come of this, I promise you, if you believe in the one true God that saved David, that saved my life, what you're dealing with now The very thing that Satan has wanted to use to destroy you will be used to deliver you. And if you believe God for it, it is His greatest will to use you. And He will use what was meant to destroy you to help you deliver others, to bring them to the Savior. So thank you for being here with me today. I feel like there's so much more I could say on this and then from other thoughts that God brought to me today along the same lines. But this is enough for now. So thank you for being with me this week. I hope you have a wonderful week. I'll be praying for all of you. I'll put a link to this sermon, like I said, on my blog, so I hope you'll go listen to it, and I'll see you next week. Thanks.